CWPA Remote.
Hi, I'm Justin Seifert, Director of Multimedia at the Collegiate Water Polo Association, and we had the honor today to be able to sit down and talk to Dr. Douglas Morton. This is a bit of a mouthful, so I hope I get it right. Chief of the Biospheric Sciences Laboratory at the Goddard Space Flight Center and an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing really well, thanks. All things considered, happy, healthy, and staying active, which is one of the things you can do during a pandemic,
Yes.
as long as you keep your distance.
That's the challenge, right? We are the Collegiate Water Polo Association, so I want to ask you first, how did you get into water polo? When did you get into water polo? And kind of walk us through how that came to be.
Sure. Well, I was a swimmer growing up, and I went to Dartmouth for my undergraduate education, and thought when I got there that I would try both swimming and try out for the water polo team. I never played before. I grew up in Wisconsin, which doesn't have a long tradition of water polo. It's got a lot of great swimmers. And so for me, it was just an exciting transition. I also played soccer and other sports growing up, but being a swimmer, that transition to water polo was really easy. Instead of being the slower or one of the slower people on the soccer field, I was the fastest person in the pool, or among the fastest person in the pool. And that was really fun. So great learning curve. I started my freshman fall and decided to stick with water polo at the club level as opposed to transitioning into a full D1 commitment for swimming. Stuck with it then and I've loved it ever since. It's such a fantastic sport. And I really just enjoyed the camaraderie. I enjoyed the challenge. And I enjoyed playing. I mean, we had a very competitive team, and so I won't lie. I mean, I think that made it more fun. Not only did we have a great group of guys out there, but we were also we were competitive in the pool, and that actually felt good to be traveling around and keeping pace with other club teams around the country. I started water polo knowing it was a club sport, but that it was already going to be played at a high level, and I think that was the right balance for me. There are tough decisions out there right now. That may not be the right choice for every program or for every player. But for me, that was perfect. I got a chance to be really invested in water polo for the fall season. And then I got a chance to explore and do a lot of other things. And so that's exactly what I was looking for in my college athletic experience. I hope others in finding water polo find something similar. But I'll acknowledge that that's probably not the hope and dream of everyone who's looking towards a college athletic career. And so I think we're a part of that conversation right now.
And I think it's interesting to note that that's kind of the value of the club system, is that someone like you can come in as a freshman, never having played, and then get in there and still learn the game, still be competitive enough, still have a good experience, and learn something, get some value out of it. But it doesn't dominate their whole college career. It enhances it, doesn't dominate it. And
that's right. And I think if you find a club that's got the right level of energy for you, you can either bring your additional enthusiasm and try to take it to the next level, or you can continue to look for other things that are going to be a better match. But for me, that sort of all in for one season, was really excellent. And then I got a chance to explore and do other things. I got to travel. I got a chance to kind of learn and grow, figure out what else I wanted to do with my life.
Always good to broaden those horizons.
For sure.
One question, do you still get to play at all?
So I have two daughters, and both of them are just as excited about being in the water and the pool as I am. And so actually, I think I have a future water polo player in our family here. But outside of that and just fooling around in the pool, I'm not playing right now, which is a bit of a loss. And yet, honestly, there's so many other fun things that are taking my time right now that I haven't found water polo as an outlet.
Well, maybe we'll see if we can hook you up with a master's program in your area. We'll send you some info. But so from that, tell us what you're doing now. Where I'll have to admit, this is the first time that I've got to email somebody that their email address ends at nasa.gov. So it's kind of exciting for me. So tell us how you go from playing club water polo at Dartmouth to working for NASA.
So it actually all starts about the same time. As I was playing club sports in college, I was also getting the opportunity to do some travel and study abroad. I worked for a while in East Africa, and that sort of led to a kind of a more of an interest in tropical forests as well as in conservation. And I continued on to do a master's where I focused most of my research in the Brazilian Amazon. And from there, wanting to study kind of our planet and how it's changing at sort of ever larger spatial scales, that really led quite naturally to having a vantage point from space. And that brought me to NASA. And so I've been at NASA for about 12 years and have enjoyed the opportunity to both be working with our current satellites that are observing the planet often twice a day, and designing the next generation of satellites. It'll help us better understand problems like wildfires, which is where I spend a lot of my time and energy these days.
Right. So just kind of briefly looking through some of your bio and stuff like that. So you work with satellites that can do things like tell forest density and makeup and things like that, as well as kind of track forest fires as they're occurring, right?
So it's true. I mean, we have about 20 satellites on orbit right now, and I'm using kind of almost all of them in different combinations to study things like wildfires. Some of those will identify the fire where it's burning. Some of those will track the smoke as it's blowing downwind. And still other satellites or other data I'm using from those same satellites will figure out how that burned ecosystem recovers over time. So it's fun. I get to play with lasers. Some of those lasers are in space. And those lasers are really designed to help us make a three-dimensional depiction of their surface. So I want to know how tall the trees are. I want to know how dense the forest is. I want to know where it's changing and what that means for our planet.
That's incredible. Now, touching on wildfires, I'm guessing you probably had a bit of a busy summer. I guess you're probably dealing globally, but at least nationally here in America, we've had a lot of wildfires. So how much hands-on stuff did you get to do with, or have to do with, the West Coast of the United States?
I mean, the West Coast is a region which is becoming ever more fire prone, and I don't need to tell you or the rest of the interested listeners about why wildfire has become kind of a chronic emergency for people living in the West Coast. This year was off the charts, right? Every year we seem to break a record for the biggest fire, for the fastest fire, and for the most acres burned because we're living in a warmer, drier, more flammable planet with more people. This year has been a real challenge. I know for a lot of our colleagues, a lot of the university systems that are in that region, and it seems like it's not just been this year, but it's been several years where sports, among other activities, have been completely disrupted by the fact that you have unhealthy air quality. And it's not just a one-day event. I think this is something that's become the new understanding about how fires are really fundamentally changing our planet, is that it's not just one day where you're sitting out of the pool or can't hit the field. It's a month. It's 2 months of persistent bad air quality where it's literally unhealthy to exercise. And so, part of my job is to figure out, can we find those fires faster? Can we anticipate the changes that will make those fires more likely? And how do we better understand and prepare for the new reality of fire?
Well, and that kind of brings me to another question I wanted to ask you. In the midst of COVID-19 and shutdowns and quarantines and all of that, how has that affected your day-to-day work? And has that added challenges to what you guys are trying to do on tracking some of these fires and your general research?
So it's a great question. I mean, in a sense, I have the unique and fortunate ability, because a lot of the work I do is remote sensing is what it's called. I'm using a camera that's already in space to look at our planet. If I can't do my job remotely, then I'm really not doing my job. By the same token, a lot of our learning also happens on the ground, or happens when we fly a small airplane around to help us connect what we could see on the ground and what we'll see from space. And so a lot of that work has been disrupted. A lot of the partnership we have in studying forest fires, for example, with the U.S. Forest Service has been interrupted. We would have been in the field this summer in California, in Alaska, in Puerto Rico to look at the impacts of hurricanes. And I would have been in Brazil at the Amazon frontier, where a lot of my research is focused in terms of how fire is a growing problem across those landscapes as well.
Well, that's it's tough. So you kind of split your time. You're based down yeah, the Goddard Space Flight Center is in Maryland, just outside DC, correct?
It is. We're the largest NASA center with 9,000 scientists and engineers who can build you anything you can dream of. And so some of the work that I was hoping to get done this summer was actually to design and start building new satellites, actually very small satellites about the size of a toaster oven, that would allow us to kind of use miniaturized technology to continue to study wildfires, giving us more observations every day and helping to improve our understanding of these fast-moving firestorms.
Well, that's great. And then you also do you still currently, when you're allowed and able to, still split some time down in Brazil with your Amazon studies?
I do. And so, pre-pandemic, I would spend maybe a month, maybe even 2 months a year, working with colleagues and collaborators, setting up and conducting field work, and basically, trying to better understand kind of the unique circumstances at the rainforest frontier. These are wonderful and charismatic and majestic and biodiverse and fascinating ecosystems. And so when I do have the chance to not just be looking from space, but to be there in person, it's a really powerful learning tool. Talking to local people, understanding more about the circumstances, and just appreciating the characteristics of those ecosystems in person. There is just nothing like the cacophony of bird sounds that wakes you somewhere between 4:15 and 6:30 in the morning every day. It's just alive.
That's great. So just kind of to tie it all back in, is there one thing? So we'll start tying it back to water polo. So going back to your days at Dartmouth, as you graduated and kind of left your water polo career for the time being, is there something that you thought of then that you would want to tell yourself when you first started? That you something that you learned along the way, could be about water polo, could be about your time there or whatever, and then we'll do the same question about, is there anything that you wish you could tell your younger self professionally? But we'll start with your water polo career. If there's a freshman water polo club player out there, is there any advice that you have for them for their club career?
For me, it was a really important journey, right? I started playing my freshman year without a lot of experience, and even though I was a confident swimmer, I think I still had my head spun around or dunked, many a time. And so I have to say that for me, looking back, the persistence really paid off, and I'm really happy that I stuck with it, and I continue to get better year after year. There's a lot to learn in a new sport, and a lot of people do come to water polo kind of for the first time at the college level. And so I think the encouragement there is to stick with it and not be discouraged, because I think the knowledge of the game and the skills are something that's in reach for a lot of people to really enjoy. I certainly did as a collegiate player, and look back really fondly on the memories I have of getting to play every fall and shooting for the collegiate club championship, with our sights on that every training session.
Well, that's great. Any advice you would give yourself as a current NASA scientist to your maybe the same self at Dartmouth?
I think some of the most formative experiences I've had along my whole professional career have been by getting out there, quite literally. In this case, the international opportunities to really immerse yourself in another language, another culture, and in a completely different set of ecosystems. And so I grew up in Wisconsin, which might be about as far away as you can get from English-speaking, dollar-using culture. And so I feel like my exposure, both at the college level and in my professional career since then, has really given me a chance to become, I think, a better global citizen, and to really take that lesson and bring it into my work. It's why I have such a passion for the global application of our satellite data, and why I think that there's just no shortage of opportunities for folks who have a chance to get out and see the world. Even just looking back at the United States from a different perspective is really powerful.
And I meant to mention this earlier, but you're talking about this global system of satellites that are observing the planet. And the way that NASA's set up, if I'm not mistaken, is that that's all basically open source. So that's shared with the world. That's not our information. That's the world's information. So it's a benefit to all of us, not just us, right? Like that's kind of how NASA has established it all, correct?
That's right. Actually, I think that's been one of the most exciting things in just the last 20 years is that NASA's commitment to making all of our data sets free and openly accessible to anybody in the world has sparked a lot of innovation. That's obviously helped support a lot of disaster response and monitoring, a lot of real practical life-saving work around the world, but also a lot of understanding about how our planet's changing and innovation. Tools like Google Maps or Google Earth are fundamentally based on the ability to access freely available NASA data. And so there's a lot of innovation that's baked in there that's really exciting. And again, I love seeing all the different spin-offs, all of the different uses of the data sets. And just being a part of that is really energizing for me.
Well, that's great. Doug, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for chatting with us. It's been a great experience. I'll see if I can put you in touch with Damon Newman over at American Water Polo and get you hooked up with a master's program there in your area too. Get you back in the pool and playing some polo.
That sounds great. I'd appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Doug. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.